Karen Ross is Professor of Gender and Media in the School of Art and Cultures at Newcastle University, and we'll be talking about good girls versus bad boys, gendered leadership and strategic journalism. And Karen was really helpful and worked with us on our previous event. So Karen, you've just started, your screen is showing really loud and clear. That's fantastic. I'm going to make sure that I leave so that my video stops, and over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Liz. Can you just confirm that you can see my screen sharing?
Yes, we can see your screen, but we can't see you yet. So you need to be, somebody needs to put, I'll put you as
you'll put me on.
We'll put you in spotlight as you talk. That'll be
okay,
fun.
So while you're doing that, so thanks for the introduction. Really great to hear the papers from yesterday and the ones so far. So I'm just going to say something about something which has started to occur to me. As someone who's spent the last 2.5 decades looking at the relationship between gender, media and politics, I suddenly kind of got an interesting feeling that the media had suddenly woken up that women could actually be leaders and effective leaders. And I started seeing some articles which went absolutely against my own research, which has always been mostly about the marginalisation and trivialisation of women politicians generally, including women political leaders. And then in April, there were a number of articles which were kind of praising women's effective leadership during kind of COVID-19. And just some examples. But what we see is that there aren't, although we talk about, the headlines are about women leaders, there are well, 2 people who particularly feature in here, but particularly Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand. And if you look at the kind of women in charge more generally, so we talk about, those articles talk about women in leadership, but actually, if we kind of consider how many women there are in leadership positions, as I'm showing here, 12 out of 193, and many of those women, as we can see, are the first woman Prime Minister, the youngest Prime Minister in the world. They also have other things in common, including the fact that 8 of them lead European nations, and most of them are leading left or centre-left leaning governments. So we can already see that it's not simply about gender, but there's also something around politics and context. Now, the leadership and communication literature basically kind of talks about gender difference in leadership styles. And it won't surprise anyone to understand that most of the traits associated with women's style of leadership are these ones, and the opposite are attributed to men. Now, most of those studies, that, without wanting to go down an essentialist kind of biological route, that's what most of the literature says. Similarly, it also says that there are kind of these 3 components to what makes effective communication: direction giving, meaning making, and empathy. So if we look at these things, and examples of women leaders are leading within a kind of COVID-19 environment, let me just show you one small clip of Sylvia Jacobs. And hopefully I can make this work.
Stop moving. If you do not have the type of bread you like in your house, eat crackers. If you do not have bread, eat cereal, eat oats, sardines. You're supposed to have a 2-week supply for hurricane. And at the beginning of this, I said, prepare your disaster kit as if you would for a hurricane. That meant some people went out and buy toilet paper and water. The water is not going to stop. The toilet paper is still in the stores. What you need is food. You need to ensure that you have food because...
Okay, so what we can see from Sylvia Jacobs' direction giving, we can see that toilet paper and water, the stockpiling of certain items, is very And then we see this quote from Angela Merkel, where she makes meaning out of what COVID-19 will actually mean for people in the community. And Jacinda, she said very clearly, she talks about empathy and kindness. My quick analysis of some of the headlines and some of the articles which are kind of praising women's leadership traits suggests that these four areas, risk-averse, self-aware, relatable and compassionate, are things which journalists at least see as part of the armory of leaders. So one thing is around early lockdown. So a number of women, including Jacinda Ardern and Angela Merkel, locked down very early, like some other countries. They are being led by science because they have some level, a level of self-awareness, which says they know. Angela Merkel particularly is someone whose approach is informed by the fact that she's a scientist. She's also, as you can see here, regularly credited as a person holding the EU together, and here she is with a face-off with Donald Trump at the G7 last year. Women leaders also tend to use experts who actually know how to communicate. So when Jacinda Ardern held the press conference for children, she included two women, Michelle Emma Dickinson, also known as Nano Girl, and Susie Wiles, also known as that pig-head science lady. And I just wonder the extent to which Boris Johnson or Donald Trump would actually put those women up in a press conference to talk about COVID-19. We also had this sense of empathy, relatability and compassion. And here we have just one example of Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg saying it's okay to feel scared. And there have been any number of press reports of Jacinda Ardern's particularly approach around a kind of ethics of care, where she's held press conferences for children. She's talked about tooth fairies and Easter Bunny being essential workers. And she also has used social media very effectively. And here's just a post from Instagram where she's talking about children could colour in this kind of template and send it. Oh, I don't know who was coughing, that wasn't me. These women, their approach and effectiveness is amplified by the comparison to their male colleagues. I just want to give one kind of short example, which just to remind us of how male leaders tend to use use experts, and also kind of how they kind of treat women experts, and also to give an example of how women in community are pushing back.
You just got a couple of minutes, Karen.
Okay.
When we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside, or when we hit the body?
Sorry.
With it.
I need to move that on. So some of you will that horrifying piece of video, but you know, as I said, it's just interesting how social media and kind of people on social media are pushing back against that. So, but I suppose what I'm arguing is that we can't use Jacinda Ardern and Angela Merkel as proxies for women's leadership, because we have here several examples of other countries which also have women leaders which are not doing so well. Serbia, Bangladesh, Belgium also has a woman prime minister. It also happens to have the worst death per capita of COVID-19. So it's not just about gender, is my point. It's about these other things: ideology, belief, values, politics, credibility and trust. And obviously I'm just riffing here with Theresa May's "This is what a feminist looks like." I beg to differ. So we're talking about these things other than simply about our sex and gender. And here are just a few examples of the same old, same old. Here's Sanna Marin being described as smart, young and beautiful. We have the kind of ongoing discourse about the appropriateness of women's ambitions to be politicians and mothers. And then we have the ways in which women are persistently commodified as bodies for the gaze of men. Here, Berlusconi has refuted that he said that, but many people think he did say that. And we already see a pushback, despite women's excellence despite some women's excellence, we're already seeing a pushback against what's going to happen next. Jacinda Ardern faces an election in September. So, but on the other hand, you know, for me, it's great to see women being leaders, being powerful, effective, compassionate, credible, and visible. This is just a crucial point. So for me,
so you need to wrap up, sorry.
I'll take that, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic, thank you so much. If you can stop sharing your screen, then we can see more of you, which would be great. Just try to put you on speaker view. We need you on speaker view rather than me. Sorry, I can't see, there you go. Okay, Karen, I've found you again. Thank you so much, Karen, for so many brilliant points. It was really good to focus on leadership. Thank you for that kind of, you know, kind of lens that's put onto how we're thinking about leadership. And there's a lot of questions that have come up in the chat, and I'm going to read out a couple of them. There's quite a few. Let me just try and think which one I'm going to focus on. So Janice McLaughlin has said the female scientific advisors in the UK government press conference have not, what do you think about that? In her view, they've not come across as empathic, too stuck within the government message. Does this speak to when some women work within structures that are not willing to be humble and empathetic?
I think that, I think that it's why we need to look at context. So I think that, you know, if we imagine that people lead, they need to lead by example. So it just seems to me that if you think about, you see, again, Jacinda Ardern is the person who is persistently framed as being the effective woman leader. Her style is really different to Angela Merkel or pretty much any other woman political leader we could imagine. Her style is very particular, but it's being kind of annexed as, you know, typical of women's political leadership style, which I would argue it isn't necessarily. So when we have, you know, when in the UK, we have our scientific advisors wheeled out, they are very stuck. They are standing behind a lectern. They are actually following the script. They're following the lead that Johnson or anyone else is putting on them. So I think that would necessarily constrain how they want to operate. Yes, and Ruth Lewis, do you think there are gender differences in terms of humility, recognizing they've made mistakes? Have you seen anything? Has there been leaders that have recognized mistakes or not? I think that, again, if we think about other male leaders, Justin Trudeau is a really good example, I think. So he would call himself a feminist. You know, he had a kind of appeal on Mother's Day that, you know, kids should go and be nice to their mums. So again, it comes back to more than simply our sex. It's who we are as people, what we actually value. And the issue about humility, I think, is really interesting because, again, there are men. I mean, Justin Trudeau is one example. I cannot think of another male leader who would ever exhibit humility publicly. I think we just have one answer to one possible further question. Catherine Wright is asking, Fanny, your talk really interesting, and wondering whether you could, you know, has the media felt drawn to Ardern and Merkel? Why such focus on them and their gender? Is this progress or essentializing kind of problematic for women in leadership? And is this also, and another question from Claire Jenkins is related to that, is this just a kind of Western perspective on gender? I know you've gone further than Western perspective, but you know, it's totally that. I mean, the thing that struck me when I was kind of reading, you know, one article after another, but they were all really concentrated and they all riffing off each other. There was one article, and then everyone thought, oh, this is a really interesting phenomenon. Let's talk about women's political leadership. But as I said, they're only really talking about Jacinda Ardern because she uses social media really effectively. She's got a young baby. She's been really it's kind of outspoken in terms of kind of women and childcare, women in politics and having children. So I think that she's a really seductive subject for politicians. But basically, it just seems to me that part of that discourse, it is about essentializing in a really unfortunate way, but part of the appeal is that how they are juxtaposed so significantly against men like Johnson, Trump and Bolsonaro. They are so obviously not those people.
Great, well that's a great place to finish. So thank you very much indeed, and I'm going to clap you again. Thank you very much. And I'm just hoping that 50 other people are doing the same in their rooms, in their bedrooms, their studies and their kitchens.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. But thank you so much for giving time.